Today I'm sharing some tips to advance to a quadruped or an all fours hover. You can use bear position, quadruped, on all fours, whatever term works best for you. This is essentially bringing the knees up off the ground and supporting yourself in an all fours position, which can be very challenging postpartum, especially when we have additional skin hanging down when we come into a hands and knees position. Couple tips I like to start with. First off is placing the feet against the wall. Sometimes that reference point can be super helpful for creating stability throughout the entire system and also generating that tension that we're seeking, especially earlier postpartum. Also, sometimes like to recommend placing a yoga block between the knees, which helps drive that adductor frontline connection right into the deep core. So we're gonna go ahead and set up in our all fours position. Have your yoga blocks handy. So I'm starting by placing my feet against the wall. And I want to think about kind of being active. So I'm not just kind of resting them here, but I'm actually actively pressing into the wall to feel that tension throughout the body and my lower limbs. Next step is to think about actively pressing through the hands. So rather than living here and kind of hanging out on the joints, we're going to think about actively pressing through the hands, but without rounding the spine. So think about keeping the sternum lifted and just actively think about pressing through the index finger and your thumb. So instead of being here, we're right here, getting that serratus on board. And when we inhale, keeping the sternum lifted, we can also get some nice backside expansion on the backside of the shoulders. And the next tip is, even being in this position is challenging, you can elevate your hands on yoga blocks just to bring the earth closer to you, which can decrease the intensity and just might make the movement more accessible. If you do so, watch that you don't completely lock out through the elbows, so keep the elbows nice and soft. I'm going to grab my yoga block and place it here. So just to review a couple of those tips, you want to place the back feet against the wall just to generate some tension and also help give us a sense of space and stability. Placing the yoga block between the knees, I'm going to actively think about pushing through the hands, especially that index finger and the thumb, and my gaze is going to be forward, sternum stays elevated. The next big tip is to start more supported, so keep the knees grounded. So first off here, I'm just going to think about inhaling. Think about that air traveling into the back side of the shoulders, and then exhale, lift bottom up, pelvic floor and up. Squeeze the block if I have it. Exhaling all the air out of the body. So I'm going to think about a nice inhale, exhale. Keeping that active press. Also watching that the pelvis doesn't tuck underneath us, keeping those sits bones kind of pointed towards the wall behind me as I actively press. Keep my gaze towards the front of my mat if I had one in front of me. Lift bottom up. Now to advance this even further, I can elevate my knees up off the ground, which is that typical variation we'll see. So when I do this, I can think about a nice inhale and then exhale, bringing my knees down. So that is a variation if staying up the entire time when your inhales and exhales is a bit too challenging. So we come up, inhale, and exhale. The next variation would be to incorporate those inhales and exhales while the knees stay elevated up off the ground, thinking about the sits bones spreading towards the wall behind you and staying nice and elevated and open so you don't kind of round through the low back. Press actively through the hands. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. So we're to review, kind of advancing that quadruped hover. I like to place the feet against the wall for some references, overall tension through the body. Utilize a yoga block between the legs to get those adductors on board and that whole frontline connection with the core. Placing the hands on a bit of support. If the yoga blocks are too high, you can put them on textbooks. Actively thinking about pushing through the hands so you can get that serratus on board and get some nice back expansion. And also starting with regressions and to elevate the knees up and hold them there on inhalation and then bring them down to the ground on exhale so you can feel that support and groundedness from the floor below. And then we can stick around for those inhales and exhales while we keep the knees elevated. So give some of these a try to master your quadruped hovers and let me know how it goes.